Okay, we're back now in the Apollo Flight Control Room where many historical missions were flown. And I think Selena Post, who we're talking with now, was here for a lot of those missions, right?
Correct.
So tell us when you started here at NASA.
I started on November 13th, 1967, which I have now, by looking at the crew ages, realized that 2 of our Russian friends were not yet born when I started here, and the rest of the crew were ages 12, 9, 6, and 3. So you have a little time set there for what was happening in 1967 with those of you who are listening.
So how did you get started? What brought you to NASA? What was going on at the time?
I was 20 years old in Houston, with a fashion career background, wanting to find a job in fashion, one car, and nothing about fashion was in the Johnson Space Center area. The closest was Gulfgate Mall at the time. So I applied for a job with Grumman Aerospace at the time, believing that only scientists and engineers who were brilliant could work for NASA directly. And I needed to not do that because I was not a brilliant engineer. So I applied with Grumman Aerospace, and they were hiring me as an engineering aide, and I thought I would safely be tucked away in a building off-site. And on the first morning of my job, was told I'd go to Building 4 in astronaut training.
Oh, wow.
And was totally terrified. But the people were so welcoming, so warm. Dot Davis and Margaret Tatum and all of the men in the simulation branch where we worked, supporting the LIMS simulator, were wonderful. From day one, they were so helpful. Made me feel a part of the team, made us all, no matter how administrative or administrivia driven our jobs were, feel that we were an integral part of Apollo.
How nice. Well, we might just insert in here real quick, Grumman, what was that? What were they doing at the time?
Grumman Aerospace was the contractor chosen to build the lunar module. So it was a very exciting time for our company. They were traditionally a Navy aircraft builder.
Okay. And they're still around, I think, working with
Northrop Grumman.
Right, the James Webb Space Telescope and the L-Cross mission. So, but at the time, we were all getting ready for the moon landing, I'm guessing.
Correct.
So, what were your duties?
My duties as an engineering aide were maintaining the math model logs, which helped make sure that the configuration of the simulator was identical to the configuration of the flight vehicle, so that the astronauts had no surprises when they actually were flying the LEM.
It's quite a change from fashion.
Yes. Although at the time it helped.
Right.
Because we all did dress appropriately for the era, which meant the lady across the hall from me who had been a Kelly girl wore her white gloves to work every day. So we were that far into fashion, being proper secretaries and proper engineering aides. Well,
okay, and I looked at your resume. It looked like you have quite a bit of different activities you've done over the years. So how did your career progress from there?
As a female, I think in the era, we usually thought a woman had to be college trained in a specific discipline to progress, and I didn't find that. I was so blessed by people who would say, would you like to try this? And so my career did progress into IT security eventually, and into, after being an executive secretary for a few years after the engineering aide position, then moving to a different contract, and then back to Grumman eventually. But professionally, I became an IT security professional, certified in that field, and took a lot of FBI, military, whatever training was available, because at the time, computer security was not a discipline we could be trained in formally. So we had to get whatever training we could get. But I've always found that the men who were skilled in the systems I was supporting were so willing to come in early or stay late and give me the sort of one-on-one technical advice I needed to make sure the security requirements were met. So it was a wonderful time to be part of this whole program.
And I noticed on your resume that you tried retirement, but it didn't seem like it stuck.
I've retired and come back 4 times. There seems to be a real need for people who are willing to work diligently and support the customer fully. And so having begun my career on site and feeling that I actually was a NASA person in so many respects because my concerns were their concerns, that each time there were issues with a contractor making NASA really happy would be those times when they'd call me and ask me to come back.
You're making people happy. Huh?
Exactly, exactly. Listening, it's just that basic listening to the requirements, listening to the customer's concerns and trying to meet those concerns. But Grumman was a company that wanted to do that. So since most of my time was with Grumman, it was a good meshing of the NASA requirements and needs with the company's ability.
Okay. So looking back over all the different things you've done, do you have a favorite or most exciting time? I mean, you know, it seems to me like it would be the Apollo time, but, you know, you tell us.
There have been so many exciting times. There have been times when, yes, Apollo, definitely when we made the lunar landing, when from a Grumman standpoint, the ascent stage worked. We didn't leave men on the moon. Everything about the vehicle worked. And then when we had the Apollo 13 crisis and the team of Grumman people came together to support using our vehicle for something it was not intended to be used for so that it became a lifeboat, that was a very exciting and rewarding time. And for me, from an IT security perspective, there were times when that field was very rewarding. We had a goal of meeting some DoD requirements when we had a DoD program here. And because of the leadership of the team that I was working with at Unisys, we won the Cogswell Award, which is a national award for security. So that was very rewarding, sort of as an aside, but all connected with the space program, because at the time, we were responsible for making sure the software provided by Unisys was appropriately developed for processing classified information in a secure fashion. So that was a very exciting time.
And I bet you met some interesting people over the years as well.
All through the years. One of the stories that I've given back to the Apollo era women at the events we've had is the story of Neil Armstrong, with whom we all enjoyed working. He was a perfect gentleman, and he was the guy who would be written up in the local newspaper as serving at the spaghetti dinner at the same time he was preparing for a flight. He was just a really well-rounded person. But I never actually had a conversation with him. I would speak to him and nod and smile. I sat right next to the elevator and stairwell in Building 4, so all of the astronauts going to the 4th floor from the front of the building would come by and stand there. So when he left, I came in one morning and found that the photograph that I'd had taped to the wall of him had a signature on it. And it said, "To Selena with thanks for 1,000 smiles, Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11. And I paraded up and down the hall blaming all the engineers for ruining my photograph until finally, a couple of months later, I looked up and he was standing at the elevator. And I said, "Mr. Armstrong, did you sign my photograph?" And he nodded yes, like a sheepish little boy.
Oh.
So that was a very poignant moment.
What a good story.
Right. And that came to mind because I had, in my retirement, I've written a book called Beyond DNA, Inheriting Spiritual Strength from the Women in Your Family Tree. And that photograph sits in my loft where I do my work. So one day when I had edited the chapter about my grandmother who had taught me pleasant expression, it clued in to the fact that something she taught me when I was very young had actually paid off many years later. Maybe blessed an astronaut.
Very cool.
Fun.
So, you know, looking back, and another question, how have you seen things change over the years, especially for women?
For women, I have to honestly say, because people have asked me this so many times, I never felt, I'm sure there were women that did feel their place in society as a woman held them back. I never felt that. In fact, as a security professional, I was typically the only female in the room. And I came up in an era when men were very well-mannered, and I always felt that they gave me maybe even more opportunity to have my say or make my point. I never felt that being a woman made it any more difficult for me, which is great that this environment provided that. But I think the people were so willing to let me grow even without technical expertise in the beginning.
Well, thank you so much. Sounds like you've had a great experience. We appreciate you sharing it with us.
You're welcome.